Most people think working nights is boring until something happens that makes you afraid to ever work alone again. Tonight's stories come from people across Japan who experienced encounters they still can't explain. Strangers who watched them for too long, phone calls that should have been impossible, and one terrifying night shift that ended with police finding evidence someone had been living beneath a worker's home. So before you lock your doors tonight, and before you stop at that late-night konbini or roadside gas station, just remember, some people only come out after midnight. The convenience store I worked at in Kanagawa used to stay open 24 hours back then. Not many people came in after midnight, maybe 5 or 6 customers if it was a busy night. Most of the time, the only sounds were the refrigerators humming and the automatic doors sliding open whenever somebody wandered in from the dark. The managers hated seeing us stand around, so during the graveyard shift, they always had us stocking shelves, rotating bento boxes, or cleaning aisles. Usually there'd be at least one other worker somewhere in the building. That night, I was completely alone. Around 2 a.m., I was crouched in the snack aisle restocking instant ramen and chips when I suddenly heard something fall in the next aisle over. At first, I assumed someone had finally come in. What caught me off guard was that I never heard the entrance doors open. Those doors were loud. You could hear them from anywhere in the store. I looked to my left occasionally and saw a man standing motionless at the end of the aisle, staring directly at me, not blinking, just staring. Can I help you? I asked. There was a long pause before he spoke. Eggs, he muttered softly. Where are the eggs? Something about him felt wrong immediately. He looked like an ordinary Japanese man in his 30s, but his face was strange, not ugly, just unsettling. His upper lip pushed outward too far, almost cartoonish, and his eyes looked slightly unfocused, like he hadn't slept in days. I pointed him toward the refrigerated section and tried not to make eye contact. The entire time I stocked shelves after that, I could feel him somewhere in the store, watching me. I hurried to finish the aisle so I could get to the stock room in the back. I grabbed my cart and started pushing it toward the employee door. But halfway there, the man suddenly stepped out from between the aisles and blocked my path. I nearly crashed into him. He smiled awkwardly. "What's your name?" he asked. I gave him a fake one immediately. "How old are you?" 22. "Student?" "No." "You have a girlfriend?" I remember laughing nervously and saying no. Then his expression changed. "What about a boyfriend?" As he said it, he placed his hand on my shoulder. Every alarm bell in my head went off. I pulled away and kept walking, but he followed right beside me, still smiling, still talking in this soft, unnatural voice. I told him straight up, "I'm not interested." He kept following me anyway. I pushed the cart faster and finally slipped into the stock room, slamming the door behind me. He didn't follow. I stayed back there for several minutes trying to calm myself down, but employees weren't supposed to hide in the back because of theft. Eventually, I figured maybe he'd gotten embarrassed and left. So I walked back toward the register to check. Nobody. The store was empty. I waited another 20 minutes. Still nothing. At that point, I assumed he'd stolen something and taken off. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I just wanted my shift to end. A little while later, I headed to the employee restroom in the back hallway. The second I sat down inside the stall, the bathroom door creaked open. My entire body froze. I didn't say anything. I didn't even breathe. Slowly, I lifted my feet off the floor so nobody could see them beneath the stall door. Then came the footsteps, stopping directly outside my stall. For what felt like forever, I stared at the floor, too terrified to move. And then I looked up. There was an eye staring at me through the crack in the stall door. I screamed. Pure instinct took over. I yanked the box cutter from my pocket, the one we used for opening cardboard boxes, and jammed it through the crack toward his face. He recoiled instantly. The second he moved, I kicked the stall door open as hard as I could and bolted out of the bathroom. I didn't even look back. I ran straight outside the store into the parking lot and called my manager over and over until he finally answered. Then I called the police. By the time officers from the local Kaidan arrived, the man was gone. No security footage caught him entering. No footage caught him leaving either. After that night, I only worked overnight shifts 2 more times before quitting completely. But even now, whenever I hear the sound of a convenience store bathroom door opening behind me late at night, I still feel that same cold panic in my chest. If you're listening to these stories alone at night, go ahead, like, and hit subscribe now. So turn the lights down, check the locks one more time, and make sure you're subscribed before we continue. Back when I had just graduated from college, I worked nights at an old gas station off Route 16, midnight to 6 in the morning. The kind of place truck drivers stopped at once every few hours. Most nights were dead silent, no music, no people, just fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the sound of insects outside. The only reason I stayed at that miserable job was because the manager paid an extra 700 yen an hour for overnight shifts. One freezing December night, I was sitting behind the counter reading manga on my phone when headlights suddenly swept across the parking lot. A red pickup truck rolled in slowly and stopped beside pump 3. A tall man stepped out. At first, I barely paid attention. I assumed he was paying by card, but after several minutes, I realized he still hadn't started pumping gas. He was just standing there, facing the machine, completely motionless. I finally stood up to look closer through the glass. That's when the man slowly turned his head toward me. I couldn't make out his face properly under the station lights. It looked almost black, not shadowed, like his features disappeared whenever I tried focusing on them. I felt this horrible chill crawl up my spine. I sat back down and pretended to read again, but I couldn't concentrate anymore. Every few seconds I looked up. Each time, he was closer. First near the pumps, then halfway across the lot, then standing near the front entrance, never walking and never moving while I watched. Just somehow closer every time I looked up. Finally, I walked to the door for a better look. The man stood inches outside the glass, tall, completely still, face swallowed in darkness, staring directly at me. I locked the door immediately and flipped the open sign to closed. I didn't care if my boss got angry. Something about that man terrified me on a level I can't explain. I crouched behind the counter where I couldn't see outside anymore and started texting everyone I knew, desperate for someone to answer. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, I worked up the courage to peek over the counter. The man was standing directly outside the door, closer than before. I screamed so loudly my throat hurt. I grabbed the phone and called the police, trying to explain there was some guy outside acting insane. The dispatcher sounded skeptical at first, but eventually agreed to send officers. Then the banging started. Not knocking, heavy thuds that shook the entire glass door like he was trying to break through it. Boom! 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 I curled up behind the register, shaking like a child. Then suddenly, silence. A few moments later, I heard a truck engine start, tires crunching gravel, driving away. When the police finally arrived, the parking lot was empty. I told them about the red pickup and which direction it headed, but there wasn't much they could do. I couldn't even describe the driver properly. All I remembered was that impossible face, or maybe the lack of one. I quit that job 3 months later and moved back into the city. To this day, I still avoid rural gas stations at night. A few years ago, I got called into an overnight shift at a small 7-Eleven after another employee suddenly called in sick. 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. The area was quiet at night. Mostly fishermen, construction workers, or drunk customers stopping in for strong zero and cigarettes. Around midnight, this man walked into the store making loud, animal-like noises. At first, I thought he might be drunk, but the closer he got, the stranger he seemed. He looked to be in his mid-20s. His head faced forward, but his eyes were rolled upward toward the ceiling the entire time. He walked right up to the counter without buying anything, just stood there, making these awful groaning sounds. My younger brother has a developmental disability, so honestly, I felt more sympathy than fear at first. I tried talking to him calmly. "Are you okay?" No response, just more strange noises. I kept checking outside to see if maybe someone was waiting for him, but the parking lot was empty. No cars, nothing. After several uncomfortable minutes, I grabbed a bag of chips and handed it to him, hoping maybe he'd leave peacefully. Without warning, he turned around and walked out of the store. I remember feeling relieved and guilty for being scared of him. About an hour later, the store phone rang. The second I answered, I heard the same noises, loud breathing, groaning. I hung up immediately. After that, paranoia completely took over. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see him standing outside. By 4 a.m., the morning shift finally arrived and I rushed home exhausted. The second I stepped into my apartment, my phone rang. 4:15 in the morning. Nobody should have been calling me. I answered slowly. The same noises filled the line again, this time louder, closer. I slammed the phone down so hard I almost broke it. That entire night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. I kept imagining someone standing outside my windows. Weeks passed. Eventually I convinced myself it had all been some sick prank. Then one afternoon I went down into my apartment building's storage basement for the first time in ages. Papers were scattered everywhere. Old food containers, dirty blankets. At first I thought maybe homeless people had broken in. Then I opened the storage closet and froze. Written across the wall in black marker were the words 7-Eleven underneath it, the address of the store I worked at, and below that, my home address. I nearly threw up. Inside the closet were several kitchen knives, lined neatly against the wall, along with one large folding knife. The police later believed someone had been living in the basement for weeks, possibly longer. I moved out less than a month later, and even now, whenever my phone rings late at night from an unknown number, I still hesitate before answering.